Okay, so radical equations. Here are just a few examples of the two types. So you have in your radical equation, you're going to have a square root sign. So this time we're going to take the square of each side. But the number one thing with the radical equations, you have to get the square root by itself. So if you look at this first example, they added the 3 over because you have to isolate that square root x plus 2 and get it by itself on one side. So that's just the main thing to remember. Get the square root by itself, then take the square. All right, so let's look at the first problem. So number 1, the square root is not by itself. You see how this plus 7 is kind of on the outside? So we need to move it to the other side. Since we're crossing the equal, you're going to do opposite. So you're going to subtract that 7 over to move it. All right, so now the square root is by itself. So take the square of each side. So put your parentheses around the square root with a little 2, and then do the same thing on the other side. So on the left side, a square and a square root are opposites. So they are going to cancel each other out. So bring down your x plus 13. Now 4 squared is 16. All right, and then just solve for x. Move your 13 over, subtract it. So for this answer, x equals 3. So for the radical equations, you're only going to get one answer that works. So the final answer is only one. Square root property has 2 answers. Radical equations only have one answer. Okay, let's try another one. So here we have 2 square roots on each side of the equal. Well, are each square root by themselves? Yes, they are. So we can, from the get-go, put your parentheses around each one and take the square. Now the square root and the square cancel each other out, so bring down your middle. And on the right side, they cancel each other out, so bring down your middle. And then solve for y. So I'm going to subtract 8y, trying to get y by itself. Then I'm going to subtract my 2. So y equals 1/2. So sometimes you'll see 1 square root and sometimes they'll have 2, 1 on each side. But you just put the square around it and it cancels the square root out, and then you can solve for your y or x, whatever the letter is. All right, so you'll see 1 of each, and then you'll see 1 other type. So the radical equations, you'll kind of have 3 different types for these. So we'll do 1 more. So now we have the next problem, a square root on the left. It's by itself, so we're not going to move anything. But if you notice on the right, we have an x plus 4. So the first example we looked at was just the number. So now we have a binomial. So this is the longer one, just forewarning. All right, so square each side. Put your parentheses around everything on each side. On the left, the square root and the square cancel out. So bring down your middle. Now on the right, When a binomial is squared, what is my first step? To write it out twice. So write it out twice. And then you're going to have to FOIL or distribute that right side. So x times x is x squared. That's 4x plus 4x plus 16. And then bring down your left side. Now combine your middles. 8x plus 16. Now we need to get everything to one side. So I'm going to move the 7x and the 36 because I don't want to have to deal with an x squared being negative. So if you move that x squared over to the left, it would become a negative. X squared cannot be negative. So just move it to the other side. So move your 7x. And move your 36. All right, we still got to get an answer for x. So I told you this is the longer way. So T-chart that negative 20. We got to get parentheses and solve for x. 1 and 20, 2 and 10, 4 and 5. They multiply to a negative, but add to a positive. So 0 equals parentheses x plus 5. And then x minus 4. Put each parentheses, equal it to 0. So x plus 5 equals 0. X minus 4 equals 0. So then we have negative 5 and positive 4. All right, can radical equations have two answers? No, they can only have one answer. So now you have to plug in each number in for x to figure out what is the correct answer. All right, so you have to check. So I guess I'll start with the negative 5. So do square root 7 times negative 5 plus 36. I don't know why it's erasing. And then do negative 5 plus 4. So negative 35 plus 36. Negative 5 plus 4 is negative 1. So then the square root of 1 is 1. Bring down your negative 1. Does 1 equal negative 1? It does not. So that negative 5 will not work. So then our final answer is the positive 4. And you can plug in the positive 4 to double check, but if you find one that doesn't work, then the answer will be the second one. So that's the longer way. When you have to square root a whole binomial on the right-hand side, you will have to check one of the answers. And then, so that is radical equations. They have one answer to